Being hard on ourselves is a challenge that many of us face. But isn't it wonderful when we can discover that something is no longer working for us? Because it is at that point that we can reason out to see what is no longer reasonable for us to believe. For example, we might believe we could have done something differently than exactly what we did in the moment that we did it. But when we recognize this pattern is no longer working for us, meaning we know what we want and can see that that doesn't produce it, then we can begin to examine that very pattern more closely. When we believe that things could be different, this is our mind playing past scenarios over and over, usually until we become exhausted from it or just distracted by something else. It's a very common and unnecessary distress that we can resolve with some reasoning. It all comes down to very simply knowing where in time we are doing the act of reasoning from, and where in time the thing we are reasoning out took place. Knowing those 2 points on the timeline. Because when we are reasoning with the past from the present, while holding any new information in our mind which we didn't have access to previously, we will get stuck in a loop that can quickly become self-abusive. Us being hard on ourselves. When our mind recognizes a discrepancy between what we did and what we think we should have done, based on the new information that was obtained since that past scenario took place, then our mind has a tendency to judge that past choice through the lens of new information which it did not have in the moment we made that choice. It may not have been the number one thing we wanted to happen in that scenario, but due to the factors available at that time of this scenario, it was the choice to make, which is why we made it. Maybe an analogy could be completing a math problem. When afterwards someone slips in an extra number into the equation. Of course, this would cause much distress or at least confusion because we remember completing the math problem. And given the exact numbers in the equation at that time, it was complete. It was correct. Even still, sometimes when we have a math problem to solve, we want the answer to be something specific. When in reality, no matter what we might want, the parts, the numbers within the equation, could have only equaled the answer that it equals, despite us perhaps wanting it to be something different. This then is part of the replaying past scenarios in our mind, unable to find resolution, because given all the numbers in the equation, at that time, it could only equal that answer. Once our mind realizes this, it can begin to settle. But then our mind might say, well, what about the things that I want? If things couldn't be any other way, then how do I create the future that I desire? As with everything, nothing stays the same. All of life is in constant motion. And due to all the little changes that happen, both in ourself and everyone and everything in our environment, the result, or the answer, could very well equal what you want in the future. And when we stay consistent with what we want, the likelihood of that coming about as a specific result in the present moment is increased. We all know this to be true in our experience already. All we have to do is look. We are just using words here to describe it in a way that's more obvious in order to support our mind relaxing. Instead of following that old mental pattern we have of constantly imagining how things could be different. And that mental and physical exhaustion that ultimately catches up with us when we try and try and try to predict, and control the world. The result of any past experience is based on the totality of conditions at that time, which in life is actually really hard to reaccount for. You have to completely let go of what you know now, completely put yourself in the shoes of yourself at that time. At that time, it was likely reasonable, appropriate, and maybe even highly effective to make the choice you made based on your goals, your desires, priorities, a whole host of environmental influences, some of which may or may not have even been completely conscious at that time. Unknowingly, to our mind of today, we have always made the best choice possible in each past moment. At the time when we made it, due to what was available to us, what we had access to, what thoughts had come into our mind at that time. Again, it all comes down to very simply knowing where in time you are doing the act of reasoning from, and where in time the thing you are reasoning out took place. Those 2 points on the timeline. When we are reasoning with the past from the present, we cannot mixy and expect our minds not to become confused and about the jumbled information. The moment we clearly see our own mind playing out this pattern, we are changed forever. It changes not only that pattern, but has other powerful implications in our lives as well. If we have actually reasonably concluded that we could not have done anything different at the point in time in which we did it, then naturally we free up an enormous bandwidth of possibilities that were closed to us previously. This reclaimed mind potential that was previously bound to replaying the past will probably be reallocated differently for everyone. So please experiment with this understanding and see how this changes your life. And then reach out to share your findings with me. And furthermore, this is important stuff. So if you feel you might need assistance in making this transformational shift, then again, please reach out. We are all doing this together. And it is important for us to all reach out as we discover and transform what is no longer reasonable for us to believe. In this case, that things could have been any different.